Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. If you hate networking but want to build meaningful connections with influencers, this cast is for you. Today, we're going to highlight what it takes to email and get replies from VIP people like high-profile founders, best-selling authors, and keynote speakers. This cast is full of actionable advice and templates from Jeremy and I, so pay attention as it may land you a meeting with the door opener you need most right now. Today, we're going to be talking about networking with cold email, a topic I'm passionate about because I was the guy that you would have seen in the networking room years ago, sort of floundering around trying to meet the right connection, client, business partner, and it just wasn't working for me. Fast forward a few years, and I've found a bit of a networking strategy that works a whole lot faster and better for connecting with people I would describe as VIPs. And today we're going to talk about it and how you can use the same approach to meet the people that you'd love to be connected with.
Okay. Before we start into that, could you just tell us what VIP means for people who haven't really listened to all our episodes in the past?
Sure. So it's a very important person. In other words, this isn't a batch and blast. Let's see how many people in your industry that you can get in front of. That's not really the name of this game, so to speak. Instead, it's handpicking a few people that would get you excited to sit down with them and put together a thoughtful outreach effort that's going to start this conversation and, more importantly, start this relationship off between you and this VIP. So a couple examples. And again, if you're listening, maybe you're already using cold email to find clients. This is not what we're going to be focusing on today. Instead, it's reaching out to maybe influencers that are in your space, that are writing impressive articles, things that you really agree with. Maybe they're podcast hosts. Maybe you've seen them give a keynote speech, an event. These are the kinds of people we're talking about reaching out to.
In essence, people who can open doors, whether it's more customers or more networking people or the right key people to talk to.
People who can open doors. That's exactly what we're talking about. Now, the before picture here is, like I said, I would try and make this happen by going to networking groups, meetups. I joined BNI for a while, and I absolutely hated it. But I still went because I'm a firm believer and you kind of got to do what needs to be done, even if you're not enjoying it, at least to make some things happen. But it was not happening, to say the least.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. At the beginning of my entrepreneurship journey, I was reaching out to all those meetups in my neighborhood that were like focusing on entrepreneurship. And what I found out is that there were a lot of wannabes over there, and whoever managed to make it didn't come back. So that definitely wasn't the right channel in order to find out people who are really savvy entrepreneurs.
I completely know what you're talking about there. Okay, so the final part of this intro is, if I would have only heard this podcast when I was in those networking groups, I would have been able to happily keep my money, stop waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and hang up that suit I had to wear for good, because it's not essential to growing a business and meeting these folks that can open doors, like Jeremy said earlier. So, okay, with that, let's dive into this process.
Awesome. So how do we do that?
First step is you need to identify people that you'd like to start relationships with, to have these connections with. Like we said in the beginning, this is a VIP list of hand-selected folks here. We're not just running a list of people, anyone that's in your industry. So you can look in many different places to find the ones that can open doors for you. But for me personally, the kinds of people that I've had a lot of fun engaging with are not only in my space, doing lead generation, but also we tend to have a similar attitude when it comes to using technology and automation to make it happen. so to speak. So some places that I like to go to find like these kinds of folks, they could be writing specific articles that talk a lot about the topics that I'm interested in. So for example, finding somebody who just published an article on using different tools to make sales automation possible. If the article is impressive, this is someone that deserves personal reach out for me, right? And I'm going to do so using a few tricks, mostly cold email. Other places that I've used to find these kinds of folks would be they've got a podcast that's focused around this topic. And also they're starting or creating companies around this space. And so just reaching out to impressive founders, probably my most go-to way to find these people here. Jeremy, you probably have a similar experience reaching out to founders as well, just half for business and also because it's exciting to people who inspire us, right?
Yeah, I've been doing that quite a few times, actually. I do that for a few reasons. One of them is obviously networking, but the other one is also finding interesting people to connect to. I've been doing that around my own town, just contacting founders and just saying like, hey guys, are you fancying a dinner where we could just, have a chat, talk about our business, some of the struggles we have and things like that. And mostly when I'm traveling as well, like, hey, I was in Belgrade 2 weeks ago. So is there any founder in this town that I should go and visit and know?
I've actually got some email copy that I'm going to share that I use when I go to a new city. Hopefully, if you're listening, you can use a similar template here to connect once you're in that town. A few things that you want to listen for. It's very...
I may actually steal it.
Oh, okay, that's totally fine. It's really simple, but like I said, just note how short it is and the tone that I'm using. It's a subject line that I stole from Jeremy. We're recycling each other's emails right now. So Jeremy, you're welcome to this. It says coffee maybe, ? Again, just to the point, very casual. It says, hey name, I found company here recently, cool stuff. That's as customized as it got basically, which sounds stupid, but I'll explain why it probably worked later. It says, I wanted to reach out to you because I'm actually flying into city in a few hours. I would be interested in meeting up with a few other founders while in the city. Any interest to meet up for a coffee or a Pilsner and talk about SaaS sales automation this week or next? Cheers from San Diego, Jack. And then I said, P.S., my LinkedIn page hyperlinked. That way they can look me up to see what's going on. I left it like not terribly customized to the business. And I picked up this tip from Dan Martell, who uses like a 2-sentence email to invite founders to his dinners whenever he hosts them. I think it's once a month. He's found that you want to write it as if you've got the keys to the kingdom. Like, that you are well worth their time. And for this type of personal, hey, I want to sit down with you email, he feels like expelling out how big a deal he is almost makes it less believable. So he just sort of makes it very plain. Here's what's going on. And of course, if they want to look into him, and I'm fairly certain everyone would click to see who it is before you agree to sit down with them, then they're going to be impressed when they see his social page. That was sort of my angle here. But this email worked like incredibly well. It landed me a meeting with a founder that I was really looking forward to getting to pick his brain about automation and the future of sales data. And it was great. And he even complimented me in person about the email. It was just straight to the point. And he happens to love Pilsner. So when I mentioned that in the email, he was like, yeah, I could tell you did your homework. And yeah, we had to set this up.
Isn't the goal to actually personalize with as little information as possible? So rather than looking like an encyclopedia of all those things that about that person, as actually finding the sort of like thing, hey, I know I'm not in Shanghai, like we talked about the previous episodes. But instead of saying like, hey, 10 years ago, I've seen that you've been doing that. And then since you're doing that, congrats on whatever, and try to pile on customization stuff.
I agree. It seems transparent when we put too many layers there, right? Where if it's mentioned in passing, like, hey, we can meet up for one of those Pilsners that like, they're obviously writing about it, so they like it, as opposed to linking to a Twitter update that they said about where to find their favorite beer. It's sort of a bit too much, right?
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's a bit like when I know it may sound strange, but I'm going to bring that back. When I was actually having my driving license the first time, it was actually at some point my instructor just told me like, that's it, Jeremy, don't do more, because the more you do, there's only chances of you doing a problem or doing some faults or some errors that will then disqualify you. So just try to open their interest without necessarily just spelling it out.
Especially because they couldn't click a calendar link and book the time for this coffee here. It was just trying to get it started so they could easily write back and ask some follow-up questions. We don't have to fill everything in this opening email. This is one example of an email that I put together that did land me a few meetings when I'm in different cities, and I highly encourage you to copy the template. And if you want to play around with adding a little bit more personalization, go right on ahead. Again, these are VIPs. Just don't overdo it and see the results. See if you get any pushback if you add too much personalization. You may find that less is more. That's an email copy to steal when you're reaching out to people that are in a city either you're traveling to or you live in. I think this will work great in both cases. However, if you're visiting a city, make sure to mention that you're going to be there for a certain amount of time so that you've got a little bit of scarcity going on. If you say you've got 2 free days and you'd love to meet, mention that, because we tend to act quicker and will respond sooner if we know that there's a limited availability here.
Jack, being curious here, how long do you usually spend crafting an email to one of those people? And just be honest with us.
Yeah.
I know my time.
That's okay. So time to be very honest. Okay.
3 seconds, top.
No, I mean, here's the thing. It's a bit of a template, right? So I'm sending this out to people that have hand selected when I go to a new city, but I may send this to 4 people when I'm in Prague, for example, and the message will vary only slightly when I'm sending it to these 4 people. So this particular template, if you will, took time to write, but once it was written, I'm basically just making slight modifications for each person I send this to. So in that light, Jeremy, I can't say that I'm spending a whole heck of a lot of time. However, the list was identical. The people that I reached out to were in the same city, and they are starting companies that focus on the exact same vertical here. So I was able to mention a few things and still have it ring true.
I guess this is fine. The question then it would be like, how long do you actually spend on the original template?
Oh.
Because then after that, it's understood that you can recycle it, which obviously there is a time of the personalization as well that you need to take into account. But the templates itself, how long do you usually take for those?
20 to 25 minutes, probably tops. Although it's a little bit weird because like I'm writing these style emails kind of all day. So it may take somebody longer or shorter depending how familiar they are with these kinds of things.
Yeah, for me, for example, I spend usually an hour just making sure that, multiple iteration and not being happy about this part, rereading out loud. So there's a ton of iteration that goes on my end. So I usually have like really great results, and I kind of also think in terms of a template and that I can then copy paste, tweak a little bit for different people. But every time it takes a lot of iteration, speaking out loud to really make sure that, I get the right message across.
I want to read one more email, and this one's kind of nice because I didn't write it, I received it.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to make only a slight sort of blurps so that I respect the privacy of the individual who sent this to me. But fast forward, I replied. I was very excited about it. We got on multiple Skype and Zoom calls, and to say the least, I think the connection is working well for both of us, right? So here's an example of we'll call it a VIP networking email that did its job. And this one does way more in personalization. So please use this as inspiration for personalizing and making it known that you've done your homework on this individual, because it can work as well, as you'll see here. So it's a little bit of a unorthodox email. So let's just dive into it. The first line is all in caps, and it says, "I am your kindred spirit." And then it gets away from all caps. It says, "No, seriously, I love your podcast with Jeremy, and I am all in on your advice. I'm also seeing the same insert topic. I'm also seeing the same keyword future that you are. Also, I'm on the top leaderboard in using insert company name. I'd love to tell you about it and connect. And that's basically it. Like, this was a very simple, flattering sort of fox and the crow email here, but I loved having a listener reach out and share that we're on the same page with something. And it was a simple, like, they did two things really well. One is the flattery. Obviously, they were listening, and that was really cool. But also, they told me that they were in the same headspace when it comes to where the sales future is going. And he also did a pretty good job of establishing authority, because he said that he was connected with some of the top leaderboard with a particular company that's also in the space. And then the call to action was essentially, I'd love to talk about it. And that was all that was needed to get me willing to reply and interested in, okay, where is he coming from in this conversation? Where could this lead? So, I mean, obviously I'm going to say it's a 5-star email because I happily replied. But again, it
did its job, right?
Yeah, it did its job. It took a total stranger and got me pretty pumped up to schedule a Zoom conversation together. And, you know, if we rewind the clocks 10 years, I'm not sure how this person would have approached me. I mean, maybe if I authored a book on cold email, it would have been much more challenging to start this conversation. But fortunately, we are in a time that makes it possible to get these types of conversations going very quickly with just 4 or 5 sentences. So reflecting that you find yourself in these unproductive networking events and you're still waiting for the right connection. You know, meeting clients aside, this is a very much worthwhile effort or strategy that you can and should be practicing in your business.
Yeah, the other thing is, I guess this is a much faster iteration, because writing a cold email will force you to think of what's my value proposition for the person I'm contacting, rather than just saying like, hey, I want to connect with people, but not really knowing what can you bring to that person. Because by cold email, maybe no one will reply to you, meaning very clearly that either they haven't read your email or they're really not interested. But it's much harder to learn that in person, because people are always trying to be nice to you or trying to soften the blow that they're not interested. They say, oh yeah, that sounds nice, I'm interested, send me an email. And then, never reply to that email. So I guess that's much more honest feedback by email than in person most of the time.
And that's something good to think about, because if somebody doesn't reply to you, it's more than they're just not checking their email. 9 times out of 10, I'm guessing Jeremy's right. You probably haven't nailed the offer, so to speak, the value you're bringing to this conversation. Because if I relook at the email I just read that did a very good job, I wonder if this individual would have said something like, hey, I love the podcast. I'm an amazing salesperson and I'm really good at doing door-to-door sales.
I know, product rocks. You should buy it.
Yeah.
What's your credit card number?
That would have been ignored. And therefore, it's an indication that this message still needs tweaking, right?
That's true.
If you want to get very good at cold email quickly, my advice to you is to pick one person a day and send them an email looking to connect with them and start a conversation. Eventually, you will get very good at turning a complete stranger into either a trusted colleague or maybe even a friend if you can structure it right. Jeremy, let's put the spotlight on you for a moment. Tell us your game plan when you reach out to very much A-list VIPs, because you've got a cool approach here that I think the listeners will enjoy.
Recently, I reached out probably 6 months ago. I decided to reach out to really high profile people that I respect a hell of a lot. And I started sending an email, and I used that to maybe show a little bit of vulnerability and give them a chance to jump in and then maybe provide some help if they wanted to. And because they said they provided this help, then that gave me some leverage or some stepping stone so I can go ahead and then just ask them something else. Like, a higher sort of like commitment, still very small, but still higher commitment. And 3-4 months afterwards, then I asked for a higher commitment. And in fact, actually, they started coming back to me. There's two things that are interesting here. I think Jack is really interested in a way that, you use one email as a stepping stone to another one. And as we're big advocates, we keep on saying that cold email is about starting a conversation, right? It's not necessarily with all the way to the end, should be into an email like a one sales letter. But the second interesting point that way too many people just ignore, and I think that's where you can really win and shine, is persistence. It doesn't have to be like stupid persistence. Like, hey, did you receive my email? Hey, did you receive my email? Hey, did you receive my email? That's annoyance, right? But the persistent that says things like, hey, since last time I sent you this email, I met up with 3 other founders. We had a blast at this dinner. Would you consider going to the next one? Or after another dinner, for example, you say like, hey, I just met with this guy. He just mentioned you. And he mentioned that you were needing of X. By the way, here is that stuff. At the end of the day, if you keep doing that, people will just say like, this person's not go away. But at the same time, it's not an annoyance per se. It's like someone very thoughtful that keeps on following. And that's usually underrated. Every time I did that with great success. Where most people, they now take the first email as a barrier to entry. I'm not even replying unless you keep on following up. So I guess that's a lesson from me if you want to reach out to really high profile people. Most of them read their emails, just ignore the first one.
So persistence, and don't go for the kill in your first email, right? So just take baby steps getting towards play the long
game if you want high value people.
That's great.
So Jack, why don't you recap all the steps?
Okay. Step 1 is identify the VAPs you want to connect with. Again, you might look for authors of books that you are a big fan of, keynote speakers at a conference that you're attending, or maybe even your favorite podcast host. Once you've got your list, then this is going to be the chance that you sit down and write out your email. Make sure to keep it short, keep it casual, and if you want to, you can add a few bits of personalization. Just don't go overboard, as we discussed. And finally, persistence pays. So if they don't get back to you the first time you reach out, try again.
There you go.
Simple, but when practice, you may realize that you no longer need to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to pointless networking events looking for interesting people in your space. This is my hope for you when you're listening here, that you do not have to do networking if you do not want to, because today it's optional.
Awesome. I think we're going to package this episode and send it to your 20 years old self.
Yeah, I know. I wish. Pending a time travel device. Okay. All right. Nice, Jeremy.
Good stuff.
Go.
Bye.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast.
So they can send awesome emails.
And make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.